Hi, I'm Jess.
Hi, I'm Ryan, and you're listening to Your Therapist is Not Okay.
On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the constant barrage of messages that often make us feel like we're not doing enough and
Hmm.
this need to be productive. We wanted to tackle how therapists see this as actually very problematic. Just want to let all of you guys know that we are in the countdown for our psychodynamic workshop. Ryan and I have been hosting this for about 5 years now, and we do a 3 day intensive teaching you all about, well, what we both got our doctorates in, which is psychodynamic. And so this is where we get attachment theory from. This is where we understand the ego, where we look at the shadow self, where we look at who we want to pretend we're going to be, the persona, which, haha, funnily enough, is today's episode a lot about perfection. If you're a psychotherapist and you're interested in learning from Ryan and I, it'll be via Zoom and it's going to be May 8th, 10th, and 11th. Give us a message at therapy@centeredself.ca or just pop onto our Instagram and DM us at your therapist is not okay. We would love to hear from you and we would love to like work together navigating psychodynamic. If you're interested in the intensive, we'll give you more information.
We'd love to see you there. So, in kind of thinking about this episode, we really connected with a few things that are happening right now in social media and just in pop culture, including lots of viral videos that we'll talk about today. And we were both kind of, well, all of us, including our producer Denise, were actually quite taken with the idea of this, the UUR book that's featured within Severance. Um, as just kind of a way to think about the obsession our culture has with progress and productivity and kind of becoming a better self. So we kind of wanted to start by thinking about what's going on with self-help books. What do we think about those?
One of the interesting things that Severance does that I kind of love, I don't think this is much of a giveaway. So if you haven't seen the show, I don't think I'm doing very much. But if you really don't want a spoiler at all, just zoom ahead like by like 10 seconds. Is that the Audi Mark is very skeptical of his brother-in-law Rickon. And this book that his brother-in-law is constantly kind of tweaking or writing, it seems like it's not his first. And you can just kind of tell his disdain, which I think anyone would also kind of, as they're watching the show, kind of like resonate with. And then you have this Innie Mark, who ostensibly is this blank slate, and how much help and care and like almost like revelations are coming up from this same book. And I think it's a really cool way of showing that there is kind of this expectation that we have against self-help books, and that actually, when we have a blank slate, we might actually be relatively
Hmm.
open to them or some of their ideas. And I liked that it had both end in the show so that we can actually do both here. Because self-help books, there's a lot of interesting podcasts about like how these books are all saying the exact same thing. Sometimes they're trying to be edgy, but really they're kind of just saying like the person that you are when you pick up this book is going to be radically different and actualized by the time you finish this book. And there can be a lot of skepticism about that, which isn't to say that these books don't have a nugget of something that could kind of like trigger something exciting and in potential in you, but that generally speaking, if you're thinking about being radically changed, you're not necessarily going to be.
I often think with self-help books that it feels like they could be distilled down into like one or a few key phrases that really capture the heart of the book. But obviously, if you want to be an author that does this, you need to make it a whole book, or you don't really have a job. It can be really often abbreviated. And when I haven't read very many self-help books, but I've kind of read some kind of adjacent type ones and listened to, other people's experience of self-help books. And usually people end up with a very brief takeaway. Like this was my takeaway. It's a sentence,
Mhm.
which is pretty normal. That's kind of the way we react with a lot of learning as humans anyway, because we can't remember everything. But anyway, that I think just kind of stands out to me as like it's not this massive revelation. It's kind of just like really one hot tip with a lot of subtext.
A lot of like testimonials and like my life was changed because I decided to wake up at 7. You're like, "Oh, okay."
Right.
Um, or like burnout means you can say no, and now you're not burnt out anymore. It's very like extreme versions of things that can actually be quite helpful.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that there's a mass marketing to this idea of health. There's like a mental health kind of industry complex.
Mhm.
And self-help books are really good at being a pickup at a bookstore to feel like I'm now have hope in my hands that I can change.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I think it's a great point. What they're really selling there is hope and the idea that you can be this better or ideal version of you, which I think links well into video trends that we've been seeing. In particular, this week we thought about these trends of morning routine videos, right? There's
Yeah.
been a few that were really serious ones from influencers, and then there's been a lot of ones that were making fun of those influencers. Um, but essentially, it takes someone through their morning routine, usually starting absurdly early, like three something or four something, and then they do a bunch of wellness activities for 5 hours before they do 45 minutes of work. And they're very steeped in wealth and resources and time, right? Where it's like, I don't just wash my face in the morning, I wash my face in Saratoga spring water. And, you know, I don't wipe my face with a damp towel after the gym. I wipe my face with the inside of a banana peel.
Okay, so Denise made us
I
watch this
fucking can't.
video and she got it on X and she was like, check this out. This is trending hard. And Ryan and I lost our shit. The
We're like,
timestamps on this video are unhinged. And like the amount of ice water this man needs on his face is beyond control. And so Ryan and I are just having a field day. Denise is sad because she couldn't capture like live reactions, but you're getting them now.
I couldn't. When I saw the banana, I could not. Oh, but it takes many hours. It's clearly there's a wealth thing happening there, and it's clearly heavily produced and fabricated, like almost any content you're going to consume online. He's gone in and added the timestamps later, which is why, like, from the time he jumps into the pool to the time he enters the pool, at the end of his dive is like 4 minutes. Like,
What are you doing in the air, buddy?
I mean, if you're not able to levitate for a while, are you really going to the gym?
Are you really
Um,
doing it?
are you even trying?
These videos are obviously fake. And yet, as a human being myself, like I'm motivated by them. It still resonates. Like you still
Mhm.
are actually pressured to want to be this kind of person. And this kind of person is productive, not lazy. They've got their stuff together. They put themselves first. I don't know. Like it's a weird kind of veneer that we're now seeking as people in 2025. And I can hear my clients constantly talk about that. There's a phrase I've been hearing over and over, which is like, I want to be the kind of person that does a 5 to 9 before my 9 to 5. And that just like, but like, aren't you sleepy in the morning? Wouldn't you like an extra snooze button? Like, how did that get out of trend? Like, can't snooze be pressed more than like 5 times? Is that okay? Like, I I'm finding myself like overwhelmed when people are talking about this productivity model.
Mm. And I think when I think about some things that have worked for me, and I want to be very clear that like I'm hook, line, and sinker for some of these wellness trends. I have my like mushroom coffee blend thing that I do every day, and I've done it for over a year now. And it's really, I mean, there are things about it that I like, and I also laugh at myself because like I'm right there with everybody. This video that we're laughing about right now, it starts with him taking his mouth tape off. I tape my mouth. I spend a lot of money on little pieces of tape, and I do that every night. So we're right there with you. We all want to kind of do this kind of wellness thing, it's so tempting to think like, oh, if I just do this, I'll get the best sleep and I'll be so refreshed. But what I found really works for me is thinking not how can I be the best or the closest to this ideal, but how do I cultivate the most peace in my life? So when you're
Mm.
talking about the morning routine thing, and like, what time that do I wake up and feel good and calm?
Mm.
What what helps me start the day feeling like I'm happy to be here? And for me, one of the things is like keep my phone across the room. I'm not a
Mm.
snoozer. First alarm when I'm up because I have to get out of bed to turn it off.
Mm.
And that for me, I know that if I scroll in bed, I'm gonna start the day feeling kind of bleh. And if my phone's next to me, I'm gonna do it because that thing is candy for the brain.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good way of kind of thinking about like some of these things are actually great. So I think the
Yeah.
point of what we're talking about and what you kind of perfectly alluded to is that like self-help is not immediately bad. It's feels like hope in a book. You can bring it, like
Mm.
you can pick it up, it's in your hands. Some of these wellness routines are probably going to do something helpful, either with digestion or for you with like your mud water. It's like it's a caffeine alternative. There's
Hmm.
so many things that actually can be helpful. And at the same time, it feels like what we're actually tackling is this pressure to be self-actualized, this pressure to be the best human you can be. And you don't just get to be that human, you have to do enough things to then actualize to become that person.
Absolutely. I think that really helps us like move into this really thinking about actualization and that being the thing that's really marketed to us. Our producer had some really interesting things to say about like noticing that this is like always trying to be better, always
Mm,
being a project that we're working on. I
yeah.
see a lot of this with like fitness stuff where people are like body under construction or my body's a work in progress. And on the one hand, Jess identified earlier that yeah, we all tend to go to the gym for a reason. There's something we're hoping to attain from that. Whether it's like strength, mobility, muscle tone, being thinner, being bigger, people go because there's something they want from that. And that's fine. But there is this kind of thing that we've mentioned in other episodes too about feeling like it's never now. I'm
Mm,
never okay or I'm never good enough now. I'm never the me I am today. That's always down the road in the future, when I hit that gym goal, when I hit that 7.5 hours of sleep average or whatever that I'm striving for.
mm,
Um, and then we really notice, especially with the video trends and even things each of us do sometimes where we're performing and trying to demonstrate either for ourselves and sometimes for others if we're kind of social media posters that we are working on this project of being better. And that, we have a certain tone about it and we're using certain products and certain approaches. Like, from the, queer community perspective, like, what gay man has ever gone to the gym if they didn't post about it? There's
mm,
so much of that, like, oh, pull day, push day.
mhm,
Like, could you just go to the gym? But then I can turn the angle on that and think like there are, times where I will occasionally will take a selfie at the gym.
mm,
Uh, and I feel like so like I want to be subtle and I feel like this little sense of shame that like, oh, I'm doing the thing. I have that
mm,
in my internal monologue too when I like catch myself doing something that irritates me when someone else does it. When I'm like, hey, you're doing the thing.
mm.
Both as a way to say like, don't do the irritating thing to myself, but also as a way to remind myself like, this is maybe just normal human behavior. It's maybe you don't have to be so on edge when someone stops at the top of a staircase.
It feels like if we're not showing the world that we are falling in line with this progress motif, are we really doing it? It's that age old of a tree falls in the forest, doesn't make a sound if no one's there to hear it, right? Like it's if I'm at the gym and no one knows, like, am I showing the world that I'm this kind of person? And this kind of came up recently for me because there's this uh Denise wanted me to show that I have all these other things going on in my life so that like these are the ways I self-care for myself. And so she's like, Jess, this is the video I want you to kind of emulate. And it was this beautiful woman like high-fiving her friend before she got on a plane and cheersing at cocktails in this amazing destination. And she was like watching a concert and like panning around perfectly to all the people. And then she's like eating a meal like daintily. And I was like, oh shit. Like, I don't think I have anything this cool. And so I was like, well, here's a picture of me dancing with my dog. I like I luckily had a friend coming over. I'm like, can we pretend I'm this person for a half an hour? She's like, sure, but we're going to a takeout dive restaurant. I'm like, can we just cheers that? Because it's not a cocktail bar downtown Toronto, but it's all I got. I never post about things like this. And I'm so undercool that like her wanting me to do this, I felt like I'm gonna be scrimping the surface of like just even trying to do what you need me to do, Denise. And so I think that there's so many people though that would easily have access to these
Mm.
videos. And I don't think that I'm necessarily doing life right by not capturing it, but I do think that it speaks to this probably for Denise was an easy ask. Like she probably would have assumed, oh, well, everyone has these videos, so why wouldn't Jess? What she doesn't realize is that my idea of a good time is reading my book on the couch with a cup of tea. And I don't think that's picture worthy.
And as you're saying that, I can totally picture moments where I or other people have like wanted to pose perfectly or set up the perfect shot that's like the book and the teacup and it's like positioned just right on the table.
Hmm.
To like somehow show that I'm having a great time when I'm reading. There are times when I've done that and then sat down to read and be like, I didn't even want to read right now. I just wanted to perform that I am a reader. And
Yeah.
then the times that, we'll be talking about something, I'm like, oh yeah, I could have taken a picture of that, but I didn't. I was just reading.
Yeah, I was just doing it.
I was just and I have such a more, I think, fulfilling and authentic time if I'm just doing it and I'm not thinking about how can I make this more better is what I was gonna say. How can I make this better? How can I elevate this is something I hear a lot right now. Like, oh, I just elevate my lifestyle a little bit, or like elevate my morning routine by using Saratoga spring water instead of tap water.
Yeah. I think when I do try to take a selfie, um, it's really upsetting when you press that like that little circle button that like turns it around to see you, and I see what my face is actually looking like reading a book. Like I'm kind of blotchy, and I'm like, oh, abort! Like, oh, no, I don't think I've got this skill set. So let's just say if you are doing it and you look glamorous while doing this, it is a skill set I don't think I'm going to attain in this lifetime.
There is, I mean, when I think about the times that I've put effort into creating a post, and I certainly have. So again, I'm right there with everyone. um, or with many of you that are doing this, where I'm like, I'm setting up lighting,
Mm,
I'm like changing my angle in my apartment so that I've got the sunlight facing me instead of behind me, and like all these little details. What do I want in my background? My closet door? No, I've got this beautiful monstera. I'm gonna get that behind me. So
mm.
we're always kind of curating it, and it becomes not only how I want to present myself, it also becomes part of what we call the persona, being, also the part that I want to think of myself as.
It feels like, just to go back to that term you used about actualization,
Mm.
this comes from somewhere. And I don't think we always realize that. Like we're trying to buy and curate actualization to prove that we're doing it. Actualization is really at the top of a pyramid from like Maslow's hierarchy of our needs. And it's really like once you've done basic needs, safety, what like belonging, when you get to the top, you've kind of, it feels like there's a veneer that you've made it. And what you're talking
Mm.
about with the monstera, with like the angle, with the lighting, you're showing the world, you're showing yourself that I am elevated. I've made it. I've bought the right products to have been this person. And ostensibly, I'm at the top of the hierarchy. And as you perfectly said, wealth can often do that
Yeah.
because you can afford to also do this, right? You've elevated up. And so it's an interesting term that is actually really not new, but it is something I think we're seeing right now when you can kind of package, market, and sell actualization. You're
Mm.
doing something very clever because it's something that we often think of as success. And if I have this product, I'm going to be good.
Right. These products then offer us the opportunity to create an image or a scenario in which we feel like we've made it to the peak of this pyramid that you're describing. But then really the camera turns off, and I don't know if you guys, if this is meaningful as a reference for everyone, but like when you go to turn on your car and before it's on, the first thing you see is all the instrument panel warning signs light up.
Go
Um,
on.
and that's how, like, that's me in the morning. Or,
Mhm.
that's maybe me if I'm not actually attending to my authentic needs and I'm like, oh, I gotta, get this perfect picture and like have all this set up. And then in reality, all my warning lights are on. And I'm
Mm.
like, oh, I need to eat something. I need to have some water, you know, instead of just pretending to be good. So, what the theory would actually say is that it's not possible to strive for and attain that self-actualization if you neglect any of the quote lower needs that you have to have foundationally to be okay. You can buy a product and perform self-actualization even if you're not safe for
Yeah,
whatever reason.
very good point.
And this, I mean, self-actualization after Maslow then got worked into Carl Rogers' theory of the development of the self and self-growth.
Mhm.
And for him, that could only be attained through really primarily authenticity and knowing the self.
It is very different, but we also see it now also in this like kind of trendy self-help or psychology models. I think one of the things that's a problem with these kinds of philosophies is that when we don't know where they come from, we're not critiquing how it's being sold.
Right.
So I do think that self-actualization is me eating as little as possible or me putting on the lights and then afterwards I'm feeling like an imposter because we don't actually understand that this term is very problematic if we take it as the end all be all.
Hmm.
Authenticity comes through that hard work of developing who we are. Authenticity and like vulnerability and understanding ourselves can't just be at the very, we can't just do that. We can't just
Hmm.
be actualized without feeling safety, without having food, without those warning lights, as you say. But when we
Right.
don't know that, that veneer is enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it does really set up these kind of those polar opposites of either I'm self-actualized and perfect or I'm in failure. I
Yeah.
haven't made it yet. I'm a mess. I need to do something to feel or demonstrate that I have attained to the self-actualization, where the theorist would say many people don't go there because I mean, it's a difficult place to get to. And it's for most people that do get there, the journey of a lifetime,
Yeah.
right? When I think about the people that I think are like, that's someone who's like deeply authentic and self-actualized. They're
Mhm.
usually pretty old, right? They've had a lot of life experience. They're done trying to take care of other people's emotions and needs, right? I think about cranky grandmas
Mm.
that are like, I don't care what anyone has to say. This is what I have to say. Or like, hi, thanks for hosting me. I'm gonna take a nap right now. I'm like, okay. Like, and everyone is just kind of like lets those people do those things out of kind of respect. We do have kind of most places have some degree of respect for elders. Um, anyway, that's just kind of one example of where I'm like, it's a lifelong journey to find that level of authenticity and peace with yourself.
It is. I had the opposite idea, but kind of I think exact similar. I think about those like people who are older and just give zero shits and like they're like, yeah, I want to wear a feather hat and like a gown on a Wednesday afternoon going to like a grocery store. It's like this is what I want to wear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Totally. Yeah. And there's some element of this even in really young folks too. Um, toddlers are fully authentic to themselves.
Mm. Hmm.
That's their nose, their tantrums, like they're just uninhibitedly, for the most part, expressing their raw emotionality.
One of the things that this kind of allows us to look into then is how do we work on this?
Hmm.
I had written in our notes, how can I be mediocre? How can I strive for the 60%? But I think that's just more cheeky when we're trying to constantly go for 110. Like, what if we're okay? And I think that that kind of moves us into goals in therapy, progress in therapy, how we can kind of use this idea of wanting to be the best version of ourselves and create pressure for us to also then be productive in the therapy space. Um, and for myself, I think a lot of our content today comes from my office. It comes from talking to people about that constant pressure that they're putting on themselves to make sure that they're at the gym by 6 a.m. For many, to make sure that they go to the gym almost every day.
Yeah.
Um, and this aspect then of like, am I doing enough here? Is like, am I getting my money's worth? Am I getting my time's worth? Because time now becomes a
Mm.
commodity in a really important way. Am I talking about the correct things? Do I need to have something very specific and life altering to talk about every single session? There's a lot of
Right.
pressure to be a good client beyond just what we've talked about usually. There's this
Right.
pressure to be doing something, to almost like finish therapy, to have these
Mhm.
revelations that are going to skyrocket us to self-actualization.
Something that I've worked with a lot of clients on, especially queer clients, that kind of relates to the opposite end of this self-actualization kind of thing is embracing failure, and really interrogating like where did the expectation that I'm failing at come from? This comes up a lot with queer folks who are not able to attain the idea of perfection because it's still laden with these particular expectations of what family values are, what work is supposed to look like, what partnership is supposed to look like. There's a beauty, and I referenced it a few episodes ago, the queer art of failure. It's a
Yeah.
J. Halberstam book. It's a theory book, not a self-help book, but maybe it will help you. Um, and it just allows for us to then examine in therapy, like, okay, so it didn't work out.
Mm,
Let's look at why that was the goal to begin with. And if
yeah.
that really felt like a loving goal.
Mhm.
I especially when it comes to fitness stuff, and I do this a lot with myself, is like, is this a goal that's about how much I hate myself right now? Or is this a goal about how good I want to feel?
Yep.
Because I know that when I'm running often, my body feels really good.
Yep.
I know if I set a weight goal and weigh myself every week, I will not want to be here. Those are both fitness goals, and each of them work for different people, right? That's fine. I'm not here to tell you your fitness goal is wrong, but I do encourage clients when they're thinking about these goals and the way they want to make progress to really think, what are the goals that make me feel good? How can I love my body every time I'm at the gym, not just the day I hit the goal?
I love this aspect of that because there's such a kindness to what you're saying, both
Mm.
in your boundary of what you don't want to do because you know it's going to hurt you, but also in realizing that this is a lovely thing that you get to do for your body by running.
Mhm.
And I think about this a lot of times when it comes to food, that
Mm.
someone had a cheat day or that someone feels like they ate bad because they maybe had dessert or that they ate more than they should have or they didn't eat the healthiest meal that they possibly could have. And
Mhm.
there feels like there's almost this punishment because you gave in. I love this aspect of thinking, what if that could be called a treat? What if that could be like, I just ate the best, yummiest meal, and that was the goal, and I achieved it. And it doesn't
Mm.
set you back. You haven't failed at something. You can have a freedom in this. I think that's something that I'm noticing time and again when I am seeing trends is that there's not a lot of like room for the messy, for the
Mm.
real, for the like just allowing relaxation or rest, even that sometimes has to be curated. And I think that that creates this rigidity of how to actualize, of how to be good enough. And if you're not doing those things, you aren't good enough. If you're not losing weight from running, Ryan, you're not doing good enough. And instead being like, how does my body feel? I'm
Right.
feeling good. Like that's the goal. It changes the scope, I think.
Then we can kind of link that with the way progress and goals show up in therapy as well. Because, yes, we might talk about these topics with our clients, and we do. But also within the therapy itself, there might be like this pressure that you were naming, Jess, for revelations and breakthroughs and like what's the big thing that's next. Whereas sometimes the goal is just being at therapy. I get to have a check-in. I feel safe and comforted, and I'm holding this space for myself to be able to use it how I need to.
Yeah.
And, trying to work with clients to not make this perfection goal of like, my
Mhm.
goal is that I hold my boundary every time. Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's not likely to be how things go, right?
Yeah.
So, like, we celebrate the tiny successes of like, I thought of a boundary that I might like to implement one day. That's amazing. You learn
Yeah.
something about yourself, you did something. Or, I decided to change a boundary because I realized it actually doesn't represent what I wanted.
Mhm.
Um, and often it can be about celebrating the messy. I had this really hard conversation with someone. It didn't go that well. I got really mad, like it was a whole mess, but you did it. You did the messy thing. And that's the real path towards that peace with yourself, working towards authenticity, self-actualization is it's messy. It is not Saratoga Springs water ice bath.
You're really big on that one.
I am because it's preposterous. Why would you use expensive bottled water just to dip your face in? Anyway.
No, I love it. I think it's a really good example of that. I also think sometimes because we're so striving within the veneer of being the hero of our narrative,
Hmm.
sometimes therapy is the place where you recognize there might be instances where you're the villain. You're
Yeah.
still the main character, you're just not the one you wanted to be. And that's okay. That's actually making you a human being. And a lot of times when we think that we have to be this person, we really don't give ourselves a lot of like breadth to be it all. That like
Right.
growing sometimes is making that mistake, being the messy fighter and realizing something deep about yourself because of that. That is beautiful progress. And it is progress because you're looking at yourself, but it's not a linear progress, it's a depth progress. You're going deeper. You're figuring something out by getting it wrong, seeing you got it
Hmm.
wrong, trying again. Those things are actually what make us alive. If we were just living this perfection, checkbox of all the things I'm doing right in the day, we're not necessarily getting to experience failure, being 60%, relaxing, not needing the pressure to be at the perfect cocktail restaurant or bar or restaurant and posting about it, but you can just be at home with a bubble bath.
Absolutely. And I guess that kind of also makes me think about relationships. In therapy with clients, we're often talking about their relationships with others. That's usually one of the foundational parts. And within that, I'm always encouraging clients to talk about what's not going well, as well
Mhm.
as what is going well, because we could do the veneer self-actualization kind of thing where it's like I can look like I have a perfect relationship. I can take the perfect selfies and go on the curated date and whatever, etc. But if that means I'm pretending the whole time I'm playing this role of happy relationship and there's stuff stewing under the surface or I'm not even aware of how I'm doing, that's still not gonna be truly a healthy relationship. Sad to say.
I think it's a really important thing to say that so often looking at ourselves and seeing the mess or seeing the things that aren't quite correct are brave and hard as hell.
Yeah.
So much easier to create a package while not looking at ourselves that deeply.
Absolutely. We kind of talked about a little bit of the idea of quality over quantity, especially when it comes to therapy, when we were preparing for this podcast. And instead of self-care or growth through therapy becoming this metric that like we want to measure highly in, we want to have a revelation every week, we want to have this kind of like frequency or speed to it. Instead, just being able to be really present,
Hmm.
be really focused on what's coming up for us in order to embrace really good quality of revelations that come from like a deep and authentic place when they're ready to, and be more at peace when we've just had 8 sessions that felt like a check-in. And that's okay. That's why you needed a check-in. You need time to process and unearth deep emotions and come to grips with things. And a lot of that work happens between sessions too.
Yeah.
The stuff we talk about in sessions is bubbling under the surface all week. You're having other and new experiences. You're trying out new things. And so then you come back and you do that. But if we think therapy happens only through big breakthroughs in the therapy session, we're really not hedging our bets very well. That's only 1 hour a week or
Hmm.
less for many folks.
And it's not uncommon for these sound bites you might get in a self-help book or something you might hear on TikTok to actually be the catalyst for change in a very bizarre way
Yeah.
that it might not be in session you're going to make this revelation. It might be like, this sparked something. All these things have the potentiality to allow you to discover something new. And sometimes it is just a soundbite that then you and I get to work on in session. We talked about that, about like the role of social media for sure. I'm repeating that. But I think that being able to recognize that this is a space for it all.
Yeah, it has ups and downs. We want to hear the ups as much as we want to hear the downs. Absolutely.
And I think one of the things that can be really helpful for us, and what I often do when I've been seeing somebody for a while, is I start to recognize that as soon as we start working on ourselves, you perfectly said this, Ryan, actualization is a lifelong process. Perfect. Exactly. And because of that, it kind of can actually be quite difficult to be in therapy for a while because we're always seeing something else we want to work on. We're always seeing something else that
Mhm.
might not quite be where we want it to be. It can make us feel like we're not getting anywhere because there's always something else. What I really like to do is actually look behind us. We might have another peak to climb in this mountain, but looking behind us and seeing how far we've traveled or how high up we've gotten, oh, you can start to see all the things that we no longer actually have to navigate anymore. And I think celebration is one of the most incredible therapeutic things we can do. And that can be anywhere from the revelations of the past to consistency to life. And we can actually transform that celebration beyond the therapy room into being proud of yourself for having a goal that you've achieved, either with the gym or in a relationship or like something you've done. We can take that kind of aspect of celebration and move it to the outside, where we might actually celebrate the fact that we could enjoy a lovely piece of cake, let's say, and not shame ourselves. That is actually beautiful. And it becomes part of this way that we can start to see ourselves less of a kind of need to just show everyone we're up here and more about like the grit that actually we truly are. I mean, some of the best Instagram people I follow do the before and the picture and the after, right? Like they'll show all the
Mhm.
setup to get the perfect image. They'll show you the image and then they'll just show these like people being like sweaty or like tired, like with like a double chin. Like they're going to show it all. And I think what they're
Mm,
attempting to do is exactly what we're talking about, is that when you just see the veneer, you forget that it is that.
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it very much is that kind of like journey or process rather than the final destination. That is where we're going to do the learning. That's where we're going to face ourselves and really come to grips with things and just embrace that self-actualization, even in Maslow's conceptualization of it. Yes, it was put at the top of this pyramid. It looks like a destination. It looks like the crowning achievement of a life, but it's actually a constant doing and practicing. it's not just a place we arrive at. So it's more, I think, and I'm not saying this is a self-actualized person, um, that there's kind of this more of a set of habits and an approach to loving myself that when I'm in that, I'm in self-actualization mode kind of. And any of us can come in and out of that any time. And as I'm saying that, I realize that I don't want it to sound like you should always be in that. Because I also think there's a real beauty in being able to come back to like, you know what, just gonna focus on my animal needs right now. Like, I just need to get some stuff done. Maybe there's a crisis happening in my life. So self-care looks like making sure I drink some water and have lunch.
Yep.
And that's beautiful. And that might not feel like, oh, I'm sliving and doing the best of the best. It looks like
Survival.
survival, which is what the first three steps in Maslow's hierarchy are. So,
Yeah.
I want to avoid making self-actualization this thing that we have to always be attaining. That like if we're not there, then we're not doing it.
Yeah. Sometimes getting out of bed is a celebration. I think that that's such a perfect thing to say because probably a lot of people are listening to this thinking, here are all the things I hide, or you're thinking them in your head and realizing that you are surviving, you are doing it, and you're finding out exactly what you need for yourself today. And sometimes that's all we need to do. What do I
Hmm.
need today? I love that.
And I think that kind of brings me to one thing that I work on a lot in therapy, and is kind of ties some of this together, is really examining the shoulds that
Mm.
people come into therapy with, or even that myself and friends come into life with, where it's like, oh, well, I shouldn't have a piece of cake, or, I really should get to the gym. And there's just something about the word should itself. And I think it's because I had a very early experience with a therapist who would often say, don't should on yourself. Because I would come into therapy with this bag fulls of shoulds of like, oh, I should do this and I should do that. And she told me like, so you need to stop shoulding on yourself. You're never going to be satisfied with anything that happens if it was always supposed to be a better, more ideal version of what happened.
Ooh,
And so my
yeah.
my choice is do this thing that I'm not ready to do or feel shame, or do
Mm.
this thing imperfectly and feel shame. And what if I repurposed that whole emotional cycle to not always end in shame? Always bring me back to I should have been better. I should have done something else. To instead just this is what happened.
I think what I really like about what you're saying is that when we're always striving for perfection, we're never going to achieve it. We literally started this podcast so that people would understand that, like, there's no such thing as a made it human.
Yeah.
It's always something that we are working on, being in. I think as we're wrapping up, I think being able to actually allow yourself to show who are you really? The more that we have a veneer around who we are, the more that we're constantly striving to buy this thing, to have success, or to be this kind of person, to not have these problems anymore, the less we're maybe sharing with everyone else. And the more we're posting about this, especially if you're an influencer listening, the less people maybe get to see all of you. And if that's your job and that's what you want to do there, I would just encourage you that one of the things we're really missing right now in society is this reality of authentic relationships, being able to grapple with something with friends, being able to be messy, being able to be in the middle.
Mhm.
That actually creates such an authenticity in relationships and with yourself that some of the pressure probably will just naturally come off with or without therapy.
One of my big takeaways with this is kind of that there is in each of our minds an ideal version of ourselves. It looks different for each of us. It's based on how we've been socialized, how we've been taught, etc., what conditions we grew up with. And if you want the real you to be able to live,
You mean the you are?
sure, Jess. And yeah, for the you are to really exist, you have to let go of that idealized version. The way I was taught that by one of my supervisors during my doctorate was I was told there's a baby that needs to die. There's a very psychodynamic kind of like, but basically the idea of being like this imagined perfect thing that you were going to be
Yeah.
can't exist if you are to exist.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much for listening today. If you have any questions that you want to bring up to us, you know where to go. Go to our Instagram, DM us. We'd love to answer.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others. And stay tuned for even more episodes coming up.
Follow us and leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell your friends.
You can also follow us on Instagram too, at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, send us a DM there. We would love to answer your questions. And a lot of our topics come from listeners just like you.